Here we go. I'm unmuted. Hi, thank you, Lenka. Thanks for the introduction, and thanks for inviting me to come and talk about photography, which I could talk about all day, as some of you who know me know. So I'm going to be, actually, just to set the scene, so I'm going to have some slides that I'm going to be sharing with you, and I'll talk you through a lot of tips and techniques, but I'll also be, as Lenka said, asking you some questions to make sure I know a little bit more about where you're coming from, what your challenges are, what you're trying to do. So that'll be a bit interactive. So please do vote on the polls. If you have got questions throughout, Lenka's just kindly volunteered to monitor them for me. So do ask, because I'm happy to stop at any point and answer the questions that are relevant, but you can also save them for the end. And at some point, I'm also going to be doing some live demos. So you'll be seeing what I'm seeing on my phone, and I'll be taking some photos. And I'll also give you an opportunity to practice as well and to play with your phones too. So all I would say is if you can have a phone next to you, then that's great, because at least you'll be able to pick it up whenever it's appropriate. And if you are not in a room that has got a window and you can physically move to a room that has got a window, that will be a little bit better as well, because there'll be an assignment at some point. But otherwise, just bear in mind that I'm going to ask you to do a few things. You don't have to, obviously, but you'll learn more if you do it. Okay, so I've seen a few familiar faces, but also some people that I didn't recognize and that I don't know. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Elodie. My surname is pronounced Giuge if you read it, but you're not sure how to pronounce it. It's quite a difficult one. And I'm a portrait and brand photographer based in Cambridge. So everything I do as a portrait and brand photographer revolves around understanding what makes every person that I photograph and every business that I photograph unique, and then capturing that for them into images. And as much as I would love to be able to professionally photograph everyone that I meet, and as much as I would love for every business to be able to afford a professional photographer for all of their needs, I know it's not always achievable. Which is why I've put this workshop together, which is about, well, if you can't have professional photos for certain aspects of what you're doing on your social media, then what are the tools and the techniques that you can use to make sure you take the best photographs that you can with the tools that you have, which most of the time is just a smartphone, which is absolutely fine. And how can you make sure that those photos are not just of a decent quality, but also that they're going to serve whatever you're trying to do on social media. So we're going to talk about all of this today. Before I do that, Lenka, if you don't mind, I'd like to find out a little bit more about how you are using social media. So what are you using it for? Because then that'll help me tailor what I say in a little bit. So if you could start the first poll, Lenka. There we go. So if you could all vote for whether you use your social media just for your personal use, or whether you've got a product-based business that you promote on social media, a service-based business, if you are managing social media for someone else's business, or if it's just using it for a side project or any other reason. I can see the votes coming in, that's great, thank you. The majority of you use social media to promote your own business, and it's a service-based business. And then the next most popular result was just for personal use. And then a side project or product-based business. So there's quite a few in there. So with the majority, like I said, being service-based business. So that's great, because I've got in particular one big example throughout the presentation, which is about a service-based business. So hopefully most of you will get a lot from it, but a lot of what I'm going to be talking about is going to be applicable across all of it. It was just for me to know what's going to be most relevant to you. So that's great. Okay, so before I get into the detail, I just wanted to talk a little bit about why images are so important. And there are quite a few stats going around that you might have heard about, you might have not, or you might just intuitively know what's happening with images. But apparently, content that is shared with a relevant image gets 94% more views than content that's shared without an image. So the images, as you would intuitively know, help grab the attention of the viewer, and it makes them more likely to read a piece of content if there is a visual that's relevant associated with it. But also it helps people remember what you're talking about better. So apparently when people hear information, they'll likely only remember 10% of what they've heard 3 days later. But for the same information, if it's paired with a relevant image, then 3 days later, people will remember 65% of the information you've shared with them. So not only it catches the attention, but it also helps you remember the message that the image supported. So the 6 images I've shared here, they are part of a campaign that Cambridge University commissioned from me a couple of years ago. And amongst other uses, it was commissioned to support a study that the university had been undertaking to show whether the students, the Cambridge University students who were doing sports competitively were negatively impacted on their academics results by the fact that they were dedicating so much of their time to sports or not. And the study actually showed that the athletes, or the people doing sports at competitive level, were getting actually as good academics results, if not better, than the students that didn't do competitive sports. So it was quite an important study for the sports center of the university, of course, because that was helping them promote the fact that students should be taking more sports, and it's not only it doesn't impact on their academic results, but also it gives them new skills like time management and leadership. And so when the study was presented, it was paired with all of these images that we prepared together, and it really helped give a buzz give a buzz around the study, but also really help people remember what the messages were. So showing these athletes in these really academic situations was really powerful. And I still every so often bump into people who tell me, were you the ones who did those pictures? Because I remember seeing them. And I think there's no denying that whatever you're trying to do on social media, so most of you are trying to promote a business, no matter how great what you have to say is, it will be more catchy and it will be remembered better if you associate it with good images. So that's what we're here to learn today, is how you can improve those images. And I want to try and get you to pause and have a little think for what you think makes a great social media photo. So I don't know if I can see the chat, actually, I might not be able to. But do you want to throw ideas and maybe Lenka can read them to tell us what you think makes a great photo for social media? Do we have any answers?
Yeah, we're getting faces, people, dogs, personal photos, the ones we don't like doing. Absolutely there with you, Claire, on this one. Real, not too staged. Photos with eye contact and minimal environment, kind of background noise, and focused, and something that is natural. Good point, I think, from Mark. Something that's relevant to the subject. Story on picture.
Wow, lots of ideas. That's great, and they're all absolutely right. So some of you have talked about different subjects that you find people interact well with. That's very true. There are things that are relevant to people, and they will resonate with those. Some of you have talked about the photo being relevant to the story. Absolutely true. Some of you have talked about eye contact and about being the person itself. All of that is very true. So when I summarize it, for me, a photo that tends to perform really well on social media is a photo that tells a story, and that's going to resonate with the people who you're trying to tell that story to. Some of you have talked about the aesthetics, a minimal background, that kind of things. And that's what I mean by it's also a photo that stands out. So it's something that's going to be aesthetically pleasing, but also that's not too common, because if people see the same kind of pictures all the time, they get a little bit tired of it. And if you come in with something a little bit different that tells a story and that's relevant to your audience, then it's going to get them to react and engage a lot better. So this is what today is going to be about. So we're going to have as Lenka said, quite a lot of information to share about how you can take better photos for your social media. And we're going to start with, how do you come up with a plan? Because if you just try and take your phone and just shoot anything randomly, it's not really going to serve you. We've just said your photos have to be relevant to your story. We've said they had to be aesthetically pleasing, good quality. So how do you prepare for this? It's going to be the first thing we look at. Then I'm going to help you and actually show you and demonstrate how you can set up your shots so that they are as good quality as possible with the equipment that you have. Then Claire just said about photos of yourself and how everyone dreads this. So I'm going to give you some tips to help you get more comfortable with the idea of being on the shots yourself. And then we'll also spend a little bit of time at the end talking about how you can enhance your pictures with some editing on your phone, but also how you can make the most use of the photos that you take so that you don't just use them as a one-off, but you can use them times and times again for different purposes. So this is everything we're going to cover. So we're going to start with how to plan for your photos. And what I find, a lot of people get stuck because they feel that they've got a blank page in front of them and they just haven't got a clue what they should take photos of to share on their social media. And the reason why this can be overwhelming is because that shouldn't be the starting point. Really, the starting point should be to think about, so your pictures are going to help you illustrate your business, your brand, your project, whatever you're trying to promote. So first you need to be clear on what you want your photos to say about your brand. Then you're going to have to think about what are the stories and the messages that you're trying to share and to talk about. And only then, once you've defined this, you can start thinking about what photos will help you illustrate those stories in an aesthetics that says what you want your brand to say about you. So I'm going to show you I'm going to show you one particular example here just to show you how we're going to break it down. And you'll have a framework here that you can use that is going to be really, really helpful for you to break it down and really plan what photos you can take that are going to be relevant. So I always start, so when I work with clients, I go in a lot more depth about the brand of that particular client, but here you can start pretty simple and ask yourself what your brand personality is. So if you were to describe your brand, your business as a person, what traits would you be talking about? Are you friendly? Are you serious? Are you artistic? So just have a think about this. Then have a think about what your brand values are. So what are the things that you stand up for? What are the things that determine how you make decisions in your business and what's important, what you prioritize? Because being clear on this will help you accessorize your shots and will help you give the right look and feel to your images. Same with your brand aesthetics. So do you have a logo? Do you have a website that has been designed with specific colors for a reason, with specific fonts? Do you tend to look as a brand, as a business, do you tend to look colorful, or do you tend to look organic or modern, minimalist? I don't know, what's the look that you're trying to go for, because you'll want your pictures to be in line with those aesthetics that you've already determined for your brand. And the fourth really important part of this first step is to think about who is your audience, because you might be taking some great photos, but if they don't resonate with your audience, they're not really going to help your business or your project or whatever you're trying to do on social media. So if I use the example, let's say I'm a personal trainer. And my brand personality is I'm quite energetic and cheerful. I like to support people and cheer them on. And I'm also quite motivated and determined. But there's loads of different types of personal trainers. What makes me different as a personal trainer? Let's say that it's not necessarily that I believe in strength and power and development. I'm not that kind of personal trainer. I'm more of a holistic kind of trainer. I want my clients to find some balance in life. I want them to grow, but not just grow their body and their strength, but also the sort of balance between mind and body. So let's say these are the things that drive how I run my business as a personal trainer. And you'll understand why that's important to define. And let's say that my aesthetics are quite bohemian, and I like earthy tones, and I like everything that's organic and natural. So we'll see how we incorporate that into the pictures. And let's say that I appeal to, that my clients tend to be professional women in their 50s and over. So that's quite important, because the type of pictures that are going to resonate with them will be quite different to the pictures that a personal trainer would use if they were targeting 20-year-old young men, for example. So that's why it's important to define that at the start. And you only need to define this once, unless that changes over the course of your business, of course. But once you've got this, you won't have to repeat it every time you want to try, every time you want to create new pictures. You'll just have to have it as a reference point. Then the second step of your plan is to think about what is it that you talk about on social media. So what are the topics that you tend to share? Do you talk about what you offer? Do you talk about the benefits of what you offer? Do you talk about your customer pain points? Do you tend to share tips? Do you talk about the tools that you use on a daily basis? Do you talk about things that inspire you? Do you talk about your work rituals, your life rituals? Whatever that is, start with this. So start listing all of those topics that you know you're going to talk about in the next few weeks. So if we go back to our example, again, I'm going to pretend I'm a personal trainer again. And let's say I'm going to promote some training plans that I'm going to be offering to my clients. Let's say I also like to talk about healthy food and how people can incorporate more healthy food in their diet. Let's say I talk about self-care a lot, and let's say that I like to address some of my customer pain points. And in particular, next week, let's say, I want to talk about what people can do when they lack motivation. So that gives you now a framework for, if this is what you're going to talk about, you can start thinking about what pictures will help you talk about these topics. And we're going to break that down. We're going to think about what photos you can take, but we'll also start planning those pictures. So where should you take them? How can you accessorize them? What are you going to need to create those photos? So if we go back to our example, to promote the training plans that I'm going to launch in a couple of weeks' time, I could just take pictures of myself working out, or I could take pictures of a client working out. Let's say I've decided it will be me working out and trying to inspire other people to work out. So I could start thinking that, you know, I might want them in with wearing different outfits or doing different exercises, and I might use my home gym if I had one, or I might do it in the garden, or so I can start defining what the pictures are going to look like at this stage and what I'm going to need. So what outfits and what weights, or you see where I'm going. So then, you know, thinking about the other examples, same sort of scenario. So now that I know I'm going to be talking about healthy food, well, a picture I could be taking could be a flat lay, so a picture taken from above with the snacks that I recommend to my clients, for example. So I could have a lot of different healthy snacks arranged in a nice way in my kitchen, and then that will allow me to talk about what people can do when they've got some cravings and what they can replace them with, for example. When I'm going to talk about self-care, some ideas that I've got for photos, it could be myself walking in the forest because that's how I recharge, or it could be myself journaling and encouraging people to do the same. It could be about meditating. So again, that gives, so now that I've got ideas, I can start thinking about where I could do it, and I could start thinking about what accessories I could bring into those pictures. And then the last idea there, if I'm going to be talking about lack of motivation, well, I've got a dog. And let's say that I know a lot of my clients have got dogs too, and that's something they're going to resonate with, then maybe to talk about motivation, I could take a picture of my dog sleeping on the sofa, for example. And then I might, you know, someone actually earlier said that dog pictures tend to work all on social media. Well, there we go. So that's something I could be using for my business in this case. So I hope that makes sense so far. So you could use, you know, exactly this framework to help you think about your brand, to help you think about what you're going to be talking about and then what pictures you can take. And you can see here in the part number 3, a lot of the things I've incorporated in my pictures are based on my brand. So because I'm all about holistic health and balance, that's why I'm thinking about journaling, and that's why I'm thinking about taking some pictures in the forest. Because my brand aesthetics are very earthy, then the forest will work really well for that. So you can see how the two things really work together and why it's important to be clear on your brand before you start thinking about how you will take your pictures. So if there are any questions, feel free to ask and or to let me know, Lenka. No, I'll take that as a no. So now that you've got a plan and you've thought about where you take those pictures, what you might need for those pictures, then it's time to set up your shots. And a lot of people think that they need, you know, great cameras or great lights or anything like that. It's not really the case. I think most smartphones these days take decent enough pictures for social media. I'm not saying that you can create your next billboard campaign with a phone. That wouldn't be good enough quality to have blown on the wall or anything like that. But for a little grid on social media, the quality will be absolutely fine. Having said that, not every picture you're going to take with the phone is going to be good if you don't pay attention to what you're doing. So here are the 4 things that will take your pictures to the next level. So you have to pay attention to your lighting, and I'll explain to you how you can do this. You have to pay attention to your background, to how you're composing and styling your picture so that it can be engaging and it will catch people's attention. And there are a few settings on your phone that can help you also make sure your pictures are of better quality. So I'm going to talk about all of these things.
Before you get into it, there is one very interesting question related to the previous kind of topic of planning. And Claire is asking, as a service business, I struggle with how to show tools, kind of software I use or solving pain points in business with. So how would you suggest that she finds topics to support this?
Yeah. So with softwares, you could be taking a screenshot. So if it's a software, if it's an app you're using on your phone, you can take a screenshot of your phone, or if it's an app you're using on your computer, you can also take a screenshot and then maybe, you know, zoom in or focus on a part of that screenshot that's relevant to what you want to say about that software. Or sometimes you just have to be a little bit less literal. If you don't want to talk about a particular software, but you want to talk about organization, then maybe you can have a notepad where you're drawing a plan or anything that can illustrate the benefits of that software for you or for your clients, for example. And with pain points, so in the service-based example that we just looked at, I said one of my customer pain points could be lack of motivation. So I was trying to think a little bit outside the box. Maybe I can show my sleepy dog, for example, to talk about this. Let's say your client's pain points could be confusion. So they might find something really difficult and you make it easy for them, for example. So you could show someone or yourself just, you know, like with your head like this and, you know, just showing yourself being confused, for example. So you can just have a think. If you don't have any ideas, just go on Pinterest, for example, and type confused, and then look at the pictures that come up, or you know, type your pain points even on Google Images and see the type of images that people have come up with that talk about these topics. And they might be very cliche, and you might think, no, I don't want to do this, or they might give you some ideas. So that's how. Those are things you can do. Okay, so I'm going to give you a little assignment to talk about lighting. So we've said lighting is one of the 4 things you need to be careful about if you want to get a good picture. So I hope you've got a phone next to you and a window next to you. I'll give you a couple of minutes and I'll ask you to take 3 pictures. So they're going to be selfies. I'm not going to ask you to share them, so don't worry, you can delete them straight after. But I just want you to take your phone, put your camera on selfie mode, and then take 3 pictures. So 1 So imagine there's a window here. You're going to take a selfie with the window behind you. Okay, that's number one. Number two, you're just going to turn around. You'll have the window next to you on the side, and you'll take another selfie. And then you're going to turn around one more time, face the window, and you're going to take another selfie. Okay, so window in your back, window on your side, window in front of you. So take those 3 pictures and compare them. So flick through them and tell me what difference you notice.
Dana is asking what was the second one. Could you repeat?
So in your back, number 1, on your side, number 2, in front of you, number 3.
And I can see the comments, they keep rolling in. Pip says the side and front images are much brighter and clearer. Claire says light behind is very dark, beside and straight on are brighter. So it seems kind of repeating the same lesson. Front one is more natural, says Sophie.
Yeah. So that's exactly right. So I did that a few weeks ago. My hair's gone a little bit since. Definitely needed a haircut. But you can see, so if you haven't been able to do it, you can see what it looks like for me. So the picture that says backlight, you can see the window behind me. Because the light is coming from the window, then the window is a lot lighter than my face, which means that it's not really obvious what's going on with this picture. Is it supposed to be a picture of me because I'm the darkest thing on the picture? So that's not on the phone. I mean, with a really good camera, you can pull this off, but with a phone, you can't pull off a light coming from behind you. So even though it's exactly the same window, I then turned the one that says side light. So I've just turned 45 degrees and had that same window to my left-hand side on this picture. And here you can say, so everyone else was saying it's brighter, which is true. So my face is lit up because now the light is coming onto my face rather than just being on my back. However, you can see that only half of my face has got light and the other half is relatively dark. And that's obviously because I'm making a shadow on myself. So the light can only hit this part of my face and the rest stays in the shadow. So that can work really well. And I would say it works really well with men in general because it highlights their features. With women, so I know it's really not a flattering picture of me, but I'm being vulnerable and sharing it. But you can see that there are lines here on my forehead that I'd rather not see. Because the light is not even, it actually highlights these lines. So if it's something you'd rather not show, then the side light is not particularly flattering. Then I've turned towards that same window, and on that day, on that window, the light was really harsh. So the light was hitting the window directly. It was a sunny day, and the light was coming onto the window. I didn't have any curtains, nothing. And because it was so harsh, well, A, I couldn't really open my eyes properly, so that's not a great look. And B, it still casted some really strong shadows on my face. So that wasn't ideal. Then all I did here is I moved across my house to the other side. And obviously if the sun is hitting one side of the house directly, then it won't be hitting the other side of the house. So that means the light on this side was a lot softer. And now I'm facing this window and you can see the light on my face is brighter than the light behind me, which is good. That's what you want with a portrait. And also the light is much softer, and these lines on my forehead that we could see with the side light, they've disappeared. I didn't Photoshop them out. I didn't do anything. All these lines on the side of my nose that we could see here, they've also disappeared. And again, I didn't Photoshop that out. It's literally that when you have got a big window in front of you with soft light, it just gives a much more flattering, even lighting on your face, which is what the go-to setup that I would recommend when you're taking pictures of yourself or of someone. So just make sure the subject is facing a window. And that's also a good tip for video calls. So this is exactly what I'm doing right now. I've got a big window in front of me, and that's why you can see my face being brighter than what's behind me. So that, I hope that makes sense for everyone. If you've done it yourself, then hopefully you've seen that how you position yourself relatively to a window, sorry, you can see how much it changes the picture. So that's why it's so important to pay attention to where your light is coming from. And you don't have to remember the theory. You next time you try, you might be confused. Is it better if it's on the side, if it's in front? You might be taking an object rather than a person, and actually maybe the side light is going to be better for that particular subject. It doesn't matter if you don't remember what you're supposed to do, just try. So just remember to turn your angles so that you can see from which side the light is going to work better for what you're trying to photograph. So as a rule of thumb, what I would say with lighting is, so you have to find a source of natural light that's going to be the best for any kind of picture you're trying to take with a phone. But as I've shown you on the pictures before, there's harsh light and there's soft light, and they give you very different results. So a tip that I've got is, if you look on the shadows on your floor, if it's harsh light, which you don't want, then you'll see very defined shadows. Oops, sorry. So here you can see every part of the window being reflected in the shadows. And that's really not ideal. So if this is all you have, then I suggest you put a piece of white fabric, so a bed sheet or a shower curtain, anything that can help soften that light. But if you can, like I did earlier, just move to the other side of wherever you are, your house, your office, anywhere you are, because if the light was this harsh on this side, then it will be soft on the other side of the house. So this is exactly what you can see on this picture. Here you can't see all the detail of the window anymore because the light is so soft that it just looks like one big pot of light. And that's much better for any kind of picture that you want to take. So that's how you find your light. And then you have to decide where to position yourself or your subject next to the light, in relation to the light rather. And like I said, just play around, just, try the front, try on the side, try on the other side, try at an angle, and then see what works best. So that was our first element, that was lighting. Once you found your light, so let's say I want to take a picture of myself, so I'm going to be facing the window because that's what's most flattering. Then if I'm going to be here, what's behind me? And is this going to serve me for the picture that I'm trying to, for the message that I'm trying to share, or for the story that I'm trying to tell? So there's a few different things to pay attention to with the background. It's the colors. So all of the colors of what's behind me are going to work with my brand aesthetics that we talked about earlier, which is why it's important to have defined this in the first place. So if the colors are not going to be compatible, let's say I've got a very pastel-like brand, but behind me I've got a very bright yellow wall, for example, then I'm going to have to find somewhere else because it's just not going to be consistent with everything else that I'm presenting on my social media. So that's the first thing, the colors. The second thing is everything on your background serving the story that you're trying to tell? If not, just remove it. It's just going to be a distraction, and it's going to distract people away from what you're trying to show them. So on the middle picture here, for example, there was a dining table on the left part of this shot, which didn't make any sense with doing yoga, for example. That was the only space we could find, but we just got rid of this dining table. There was a bin on the right hand side, we've replaced it with a plant. So you can still make use of whatever space you have, but just make sure you take away anything that's not adding to your story. And someone said earlier, clean backgrounds. I agree with this. It makes your subject stand out more if there's not much clutter behind it and not many other things competing with your subject. And then the third thing to consider with your backgrounds is to pick areas or textures that are going to support your stories. So actually what's happening with the third picture here is it looks like we're in the kitchen, and because that was the story we wanted to tell, we wanted to talk about someone who's taking those supplements in the morning as part of their routine. So in the morning, what you do, you make a tea or coffee in your kitchen. But we didn't have access to a kitchen for this particular shoot. So what we did is we actually just used some boards where we put some sticker tiles, and then we put some sticker marble, and we just made it look like a kitchen. And people, when they see this picture, they think it was taken in a kitchen, because the textures and the patterns that we've picked are very credible to be in a kitchen. So sometimes you have to be a little bit creative to try and make sure that, again, your background is part of your story and is going to help you talk about what you're trying to talk about. So we talked about lighting, we've talked about background. We're then going to move on to composition. So you've found your light, you've checked your background is going to work for your story. Now the next decision you have to take is, how are you going to frame your picture? Okay, so you've found your light, checked your background, removed all the distraction. Now you're ready to take your picture, but you still need to think about what exactly you're going to put in your frame. And the first important factor to consider is, which platform are you going to use that picture? Because they all have very different requirements. So I've tried to illustrate this in here. It's a little bit busy, but you're all quite familiar with Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, LinkedIn. So depending on what you want to do with your photo, it will need to be in a different format. So with Instagram, everything you're sharing on your feed can be portrait, vertical, can be landscape, horizontal, or can be square. But ultimately, when you look at your grid, even if you've shared a horizontal or a vertical picture, it will just show as a square on your grid. So you need to be sure that even if you're sharing, let's say, a landscape picture, the square preview is still going to be appealing and still going to make sense. So I'll show you a few examples about that. If you're going to be posting for a Facebook banner, for example, or for a Facebook group cover, then as you can see here, you'll need to make sure that your photo is quite long and thin. So that's going to change how you frame it. If you want to take a picture for a Pinterest pin, then it will have to be vertical. And so again, that changes how you frame your picture. So you get the idea. If you don't know in advance what you're going to be using the image for, then you might frame it the wrong way and then it might not be usable. So just make sure you know exactly what you're shooting for in the first place. So let's look at some examples here. 4 pictures that on their own, composition wise, they make sense, but depending on how I want to use them, they're not all going to be usable. So let's say I need a banner like picture, so horizontal banner for my Facebook group, for example. Then this one will work because I've got nice space and I can even add some text over here. This one will work, this one will work. Obviously this one wouldn't be usable as a horizontal banner. But let's say now I wanted to use it on Instagram. I could post all of them in their original format pretty much, but then the preview on the grid would only be a square. So let's see what they all look like as a square. The first one, if I crop my square to the left here, it would work. It's a nice enough picture as a square. But this one, for example, as a square, it just looks like a foot. So we can't see the brand of the mat anymore, which was part of the story initially. We can't really see that she's doing yoga so much if we lose everything else. So that wouldn't work very well for Instagram. Same with this one. As a square, it just looks like hands. So we lose the balance in the picture, we lose some of the lines, and it just doesn't really make sense. Whereas this one would also work as a square. So that's just to illustrate that when you're going to be framing your pictures, you have to be mindful of how it will eventually be cropped by the platform that you're using. That's quite important. So some more tips in terms of composition. I showed this example earlier where I've left intentionally space for text. So that's something you need to bear in mind as well. So if you know that you're going to want to add some kind of graphics or some kind of text, then you need to make sure that there's a part of the image that's not going to be so busy that your text won't be readable. So you have to frame intentionally for that. And then think of ways that you can draw the eye to your subject. So you can do that with contrasting colors. So I find on this image, for example, the hands are a very different color from the mat. So it's quite obvious that we're looking at someone who's stretching on a yoga mat. Here, there's the focus is different. So we've got the focus on the brand and what's going on in the foreground, and then the background is blurred. So that sometimes can help draw the attention to a particular subject. But also just move around. So these 3 pictures here, the subject didn't move, the decor didn't move, but the photographer, myself, moved around the subject, and I was in front of her, then I went to the side, then I went above, then I went at an angle, and you can see how much variation you can get by just moving around. And that helps create interest as well. So there are angles that people are very used to. So let's say this one where I'm just straight in front of the subject. It's a very common angle. So people might not really pay attention to it on their feed. But if you find an angle that's slightly different to what they're used to, then it makes the image a little bit more interesting. So challenge yourself when you're taking a picture to not take the same picture from the same angle all the time. Move around and see what you're getting. And even when you found a spot, keep also moving your phone, because you might go a little bit more to this side, to that side, and you might get different things into your frame. We're going to actually demonstrate that in a little bit as well, but that's to give you some ideas. So just a few examples here to show you, to talk about composition. So sometimes you might want to have your subject in the middle of your frame. So here, the subject was the tablets. Here we've got our yoga trainer. Sometimes you might want to have them more to the side, like here. Sometimes you could be using lines to sort of frame your subjects. And here again, you've got lots of parallel lines. That adds a bit of, it's a bit more dynamic. It just gives a little bit of tension to the image. I didn't want to go into too much details about the rules of composition, because I find they do help sometimes, but actually most times it's better for you to just experiment. Just try and see what works best for this particular picture, and don't feel constrained by, oh, I don't want my subject in the middle, or I don't want my subject on the side. Just try it and see what's going to make your picture more interesting. The only rule I'm going to talk about, because you might have heard about it and it can sometimes be helpful, is called the rule of thirds. So you can see here on this, I've just illustrated it on this image. The theory goes that if you split your image into 9 quadrants, so 2 lines horizontally, 2 lines vertically, then if you position your subject either on one or a couple of these lines, or on the intersections of these lines here, then you tend to get a little bit more interest in your picture. And that's just, it's true sometimes, it's not always true. So here you can see it kind of worked in this picture. We've got the till on 1/3, we've got the text on the top third, we've got pretty much the 2 subjects on the 2 lines, and it does make it work. So sometimes it's just a guide to help you get off always having your subject in the middle. Just try and use those imaginary lines to see if you can get a little bit more interest in your picture. Another thing that's really helpful when it comes to how you are composing your pictures is to add some props and to add some elements that will tell a bit more of a story and that will give your photos a bit more personality. If I go back actually to one of the examples here. So here we were trying to take, some of you have said at the start in the poll that you have got a product-based business. So here we were trying to promote this product, which is a bottle of supplements for pets. Now, if you just try and take a picture of this box of supplements on its own, it's going to be a relatively boring picture. It's okay if you're just trying to sell it on Amazon, you just need it on a white background, it's fine. But if you're trying to use it on social media to get some engagement, you're going to have to be a little bit more creative. So think about what's the story again. So this is about pets being healthy. So, you know, what's related to pets that we can bring into the picture? Well, let's, you know, we can have some pets food or treats. We can have a bowl. We can have a lead, because if the pets are healthy, then they will go out and have a lot of energy and so on. And then you just bring that into your frame and you try and move them around and you try and see what creates a nice interest in the picture. And again, we've thought about the colors here with in line with the brand and with the idea of energy and so on. So that's how you can add a little bit more life to your shots. Things about the props that are related to your story, or sometimes think about props that are related to your core values that we talked about earlier. And that all helps with the aesthetics of your photos.
So we have one question related to the slide, just to clarify. So Tana is asking, is the goal to have the subject in the middle square? Could you just clarify what is the goal, if there is a goal?
So the goal, if you follow the rule of thirds, which, like I say, you don't always have to, sometimes rules need to be broken. The goal with the rule of third is to either line up your subject with one or two of these lines here, or with the intersections of the lines. So here we kind of, you know, it's a little bit off because the picture is not actually full on this line, unfortunately. So when I've put the lines, it was a little bit offset, but we kind of have this subject along this line, this subject along that line. And then we've got the top third, which has got the brand name, and we've got the bottom third that has got what is going on with all the food as well. So yeah, it's about the lines and the intersections of the lines to avoid having your subject right in the middle.
We have one more question that I kind of missed before, which was related to the light. And Rich was saying that one issue with the window in front of you is that you get a reflection of the windows in your glasses.
Your glasses, yeah.
Any tips when you're wearing glasses?
Yep, okay. Quite a few, because I've got this problem too, as you can tell. First one is, next time you buy new glasses, try and get the best anti-reflection coat as you can, because that does make a big difference. But obviously, whatever glasses you have now, you just have that to play with. So the other tip, or actually, you know, before that, clean your glasses, because that also helps a lot. Once you've done that, so you know, you've got whatever coat you've got on and you've cleaned them, if you're still getting a reflection, what you can do is to tilt the glasses slightly down. So sorry, just so you can see, I'm just bringing the back of my glasses a bit higher up on my ears so that the glasses here are slightly tilted down. And that actually usually just gets rid of the reflections. You don't have to do it too much. Don't go like this because you won't look right. But just do a little bit, and that usually gets rid of the reflection. Any other questions?
That's all the questions we had so far.
Great. So yes, so styling the shot. So we were just talking about, you know, how we use some props to style around this product here to bring a little bit more life and a bit more of a story. So here are some other examples that you can use. And this is, again, that goes back to having defined your values at the start. Those props might not be strictly relevant to your story, but they help style and add some personality that's relevant to your value and to what you want your brand to be associated with. So if your brand is quite fun, then you can use things like confetti, or you can use maybe mini eggs, because they're really colorful and they're quite fun, and you can just spread them on your flat lay if you're doing a flat lay, for example. Or if your brand, like our example of the personal trainer, is quite organic, then try and bring some more fabrics into your shot, bring some leaves, bring some plants, bring some nice ceramics. So if you're going to do a shot where you're drinking a coffee, don't have it in a bright mug, just have a nice ceramic mug, for example, because all these things will change how people perceive your pictures and therefore how they perceive your brand. And the more you can reinforce your brand in your pictures, the more you can then be very easily recognizable and memorable. So here are just some ideas for you. Right, so that was, sorry for that, a lot of information. And before we continue, I just want to show you that in practice. So I'm going to show you what a difference the light makes. I'm going to show you what we can do with backgrounds and how that changes the pictures. And I'm going to show you how to compose to get a shot that makes sense. Okay.
Dana is asking, is the phone iPhone? So this.
Good point. No, I've got a Samsung phone, but I will cover a few differences between iPhones and Android phones. Okay, so earlier we imagined that I was a personal trainer, which, as you can tell, I'm not. But we were talking about a personal trainer who was quite holistic, and it was all about self-care, someone who was promoting self-care. And one of the ideas for the photos that we had to talk about self-care was to talk about journaling. So I'm going to try and set up a shot to illustrate my next, let's say, Instagram post, where I'm going to help people manage maybe some of their stress and some of their anxiety through journaling. So let me go back to my camera. So you should see, so right now, I've got my phone on a tripod simply because I need my hands to do other things. You don't need a tripod to do what I'm doing. You just need to be holding your phone, but I just wanted you to see live everything that I'm doing. So let's imagine this white thing is a table. It's not really, but it's just, let's say in my house, all I have is a white table. Here's a journal that I want to use as a prop. It doesn't look particularly interesting on that white table. But I know it's got to be the subject of my shots. It's all about journaling, so I do need to have it there. So what else can I associate with journaling and self-care, calmness? Maybe a candle. So let's try and bring a candle in the shot. And also maybe some essential oils. So I'll bring them in the shot. And you can see what's on my screen. And it's going to be quite tough for me to make an interesting picture out of this. Simply because the colors are all kind of similar. It's all very white. And then there's not really a story. My background, what is it telling us? It's just telling us it's a table. Not particularly helpful. So if I think about journaling, when do I do it? Some people do it in the evening. Let's say I do it in the morning. So what do I associate with the morning? Maybe I do it in bed. Maybe I do it before I check my phone, before I get up to make a coffee, to have a shower. So if I think about my background, then I could try and incorporate something to do with the bed. So what I've done here is I'm cheating, and the good thing about photos, you don't have to set everything in real life. You can use a few hacks. So what I've got is just some bedding, which I'm going to put on top of the table. I'll show you what that looks like. Get rid of this. And now it looks a little bit more like a bed, right? So let's say I'm still going to use the same props. Okay, let me see what I'm doing. So here's my journal. It wouldn't make sense to have a candle in the bed like this, would it? So I'm not going to do that. But if I still want to bring the candle as a sign of calmness, and if I'm now making my scene more about breakfast, then one thing I could do is I could also use a tray which would make a little bit more sense to have in a bed. Okay, so now I've got different colors. I've got some lines from the tray. That adds a bit of interest to my composition and it makes a bit more sense. I've got a cup of coffee, again, to reiterate that it's a morning scene from my journal. Now I can have, if I want, still a candle here. If I want to keep it, maybe I won't. I could still have my essential oils here, for example. A pen, because I'm writing, oops, sorry. Okay. And I said I was going to use this photo for Instagram. So I'll need to make sure that the photo works well as a square. So what I can do on my phone here, if you look at the top, you can see the fourth icon from the left says 3:4. That's the ratio of my picture. If I change this to 1:1, which is a square, I can now see what the picture would look like as a square. I'm not going to take the picture like this, and I'll explain why in a minute, but it helps me frame it in a way that will work as a square. So I might just move this a bit more here. Actually, I might think of that. I might change this here. And then we said earlier, my brand is quite organic, so it's nice to bring in some fabrics and some linens, and that would make sense with my morning scene. So I'm just gonna add, oops, actually, I could do that. I'm not sure it really serves the scene, but I also thought maybe some lavender for the calmness. So you can just play around and see what works. So I don't actually like this as much, so I'll just go back to this and this. Actually, I might do that. No. So you see what I'm doing? I just keep moving things until I find something that I like. And again, there's not much theory here. It's just experimenting and seeing what works. So let's say I'm going to scrub that to look a bit more like a bed. And here we go. So I could take this photo. I will just go back to this format and I'll explain why. And I'll take it. So what you didn't see is there's a window here and I'm set up right next to the window to my side. If I hadn't done this, I'm just going to show you actually. So I'll get some light from over there and I'll put some curtains on the window. It's probably hard to tell, but it changes the light on my picture. And if I try to take the picture without the light on the side, then a lot of the contrast and the textures from the duvet wouldn't be as obvious and it would look really flat. So having this window, as I've explained earlier, soft light from a window to the side of my flat lay really helps add this depth here. So you've seen how we've positioned ourselves next to the window. We've changed our background so they could tell a bit more of a story. And then we've used props that resonated with our brand values, with what our customers would also resonate with. And we've just moved things around until we had the composition that we liked. It's relatively simple when you think about it, but it just takes a little bit of practice and a little bit of experimentation. Right. There are also a few tricks and things you can change on your phone when you take a picture that can make a difference to your picture. If you've done the three things we just talked about, the light, the background, the composition, you're 95% of the way there. You won't have to do much more to your picture. It will be quite hard to get wrong, but there are still a few things. So I'm going to show you. I'm going to go back to my phone.
Before you get really into this topic, there was one question in relation to kind of the items, and Claire is asking, would you recommend using personal items for images, such as magazines, chocolates, that show that, for example, she eats organic or reads positive news?
So yes, only if they make sense to your brand and they make sense to your audience. So if they support what you're trying to say, if they resonate with your audience, if they share the same values as your brand values, absolutely, because they're available to you. You've got them already in your house, so that's perfect. So you don't always have to go and buy things. Just go back to your plan, go back to your first step of the plan where you've defined your brand personality, your brand values, your brand aesthetics, and your audience, and think about what aligns, what do you have available around you that aligns with all of these things. And if you don't have anything available, then yes, do go and buy other things if you need to. But most of the time you should be able to find, especially if you run your own business and it's a one-man band, your brand personality tends to be very similar to your own personality. So you more likely not already have the props that can work for your brand.
Cool. We have one more question. I'm not 100% sure I understand it. Maybe it will make more sense to you. It's from Ansel, who's asking for advice on using motifs and how to add some humor to his visuals.
So do you mean adding graphics to a picture? So adding that in post, in when you edit your pictures? Like adding drawings and things like that?
We'll probably pick up on this question later on. I just want to put it out there. If we can please drop us a comment with a little bit more specifics for this. So Elodie has a better idea of what is it that you're asking for, what you're trying to achieve, and we'll get back to the question later on.
Yeah, perfect. We'll do that. Okay, so you've set everything up. What are the last few things that you can tweak to make sure you get the best result from your phone? The first thing sounds so basic, but trust me, even I sometimes forget to do it and it changes everything. Wipe your lens, wipe your phone lens. Just, take whatever you're wearing, as long as it's not abrasive. I don't think we wear anything too abrasive. Just literally just wipe your lens before you take a picture. Because if it's got fingerprints, then you'll get some kind of smudge over your pictures. The light is not going to be even. Very simple, but just make sure you do it every single time. Just clean your lens beforehand. Then on iPhones, by default, the image quality is going to be set to the highest, and there's nothing you can change. On an Android phone, you can change the size of the images that you take. You just need to go into your settings, in your camera settings rather, sorry. So you open your camera, you go into the settings, and actually I'm going to try and demonstrate it from my phone. Or just do it and tell you. So it depends, of course, on the version of phone and version of Android that you have. But you can often find, actually I've just got a new phone, it's not on this one anymore. So it will depend a lot on what phone you have. So if you've got Android, as Samsung or anything else, do double check camera settings if there are any options to change the size of your images. What I recommend is, in particular for the front camera, so on all the phones, the back camera has got a much higher resolution than the front camera. The front one is the ones you tend to take selfies with. make sure you go as high as you can on the quality and the size of the images taken from the front camera. That will help you just get as good quality as you can. And on the back camera, just you don't have to go to the max. If you've got a recent phone, the maximum size is going to be really, really high quality, higher than what you need. And therefore your files are going to be very large and they're going to be harder to send and manipulate. So just as long as you make sure, if you do have the option to change the size, that you're above 1000 pixels on the small edge of your picture. So if it's horizontal on this edge, then that will be enough for social media, for most platforms. So that's one thing. Next thing, focusing. So some people just do it automatically. Some people don't realize you can do it. It doesn't matter if you're on an iPhone or on an Android phone. When you are on your camera and you're about to take a picture, if you just tap on what you want to be in focus, so the most important subject in your picture. So let's say here, this picture example I've got on the slide. I wanted to make sure that, well, there's not many subjects. There's a coffee cup and some coffee beans. But if I just press my finger on the camera on top of the coffee, the camera will focus on what I've tapped on. So just do a single tap and then press your camera button to take the picture. When you're taking a flat lay, there's not much depth anyway. Everything is pretty much on the same plane. So the focus shouldn't be an issue, but if you're taking a photo of something that's in front of you and there are many layers, let's say you're in a room and there's a lot of space between your subject and the wall, if by mistake the camera was focusing on the wall, then it could be that your subject that's far away from the wall is not going to be in focus. So just again, just make sure you tap on your screen just once on the face of your subject. The camera will focus where you want it to, and then you just press the button to take your picture. That's all very simple to do. Next thing is something I might need to demonstrate actually. The exposure, for those of you who don't know what it is, it's pretty much the brightness or the darkness of your picture. If all you do with the phone is just tap the photo button to take the picture, then you're letting your phone decide on how bright or how dark the photo should be. Phones are pretty good these days, so they get it relatively right most of the time, but they don't always. So it's good to learn how to override that to how bright or how dark you want the photo to be when you see it. On an Android phone, if I tap my screen, which I just did there, so A, that does the focus that I just talked about, but B, I get this slider. You see the horizontal slider that I'm moving at the moment? If I slide to the left, it darkens my picture. And if I slide to the right, it brightens it. So then it's down to your vision and your creativity. If I wanted a very contrasty shot, let's say I'm talking about very early morning rises, then I can decide to go a little bit more dark than what my camera said. Or if I want a really bright picture, because a lot of my feed is very bright, I'll just go more to the right. On an iPhone, it's the same principle. I'll just stop sharing this. You also have a slider, but instead of being a horizontal slider, when you tap on your picture, it's a vertical slider. So if you go up, it will be lighter. It will make your picture lighter. If you go down, it will make your picture darker. Again, that's very simple to use as long as you know that it's there and that you can use it to expose your picture in the way that you want to. Blurring your background. So this is something that's not helpful or necessary if you're taking a flat lay like I just did here, because like I said, everything is pretty much on the same level. So you don't really, there's no interest in trying to blur anything. But if you're taking a portrait of someone in a room and you don't want the whole room to be in focus, you just want your subject to stand out a little bit more, then you can blur your background. Now with a professional camera, you do that by changing your aperture, and there's loads of more technical things that you need to do. On a phone, you don't have necessarily the ability to change all of your camera settings, but the smartphones, the relatively recent ones, have created an artificial way to blur the background. So you just have to bear in mind it's not always going to look as natural and as professional as a professional camera, but it does work most of the time. So how you do this on an iPhone, when you go into your camera, you have different photo modes. It has to be a relatively recent, maybe 3 years old iPhone at the most. There's one of the photo modes that's called portrait mode. And if you select that one, so if you have an iPhone in front of you, you can try that if you haven't tried it yet. When you focus on your subject, so you have to tell your phone where the focus should be, so what's going to be sharp. So let's say that's your subject's face, then the phone will blur everything around it. It's done artificially, like I said, so sometimes it doesn't look quite right, but sometimes it helps just draw the eye to what you want to draw if the background is really busy. On an Android phone, or at least on a Samsung phone that's relatively recent, it's also a photo mode, but it's not called portrait, it's called live focus. So you just go into your camera, look at the different photo modes, find live focus, and then it works the same. You press on what you want to be in focus, what you want to look sharp, and then the phone blurs everything around it. So if you're not sure how to do that, maybe Google it for your particular phone. I'm sure you'll find some YouTube videos that show you how to do it on your phone. But it's a good thing to practice because sometimes it helps. And the last thing you can do on your phone is, we talked about the rule of thirds earlier. So you remember these 2 lines and 2 lines, and how you can line your subject on one of the lines or 2 of the lines, or on the intersections of the lines. To help you do that on a phone, you can actually, in your camera app, you can go into your settings, and it's usually called grid lines. So you just enable grid lines, and then every time you open your camera on your phone, you will have these 4 lines already there on the screen. They won't be on the pictures that you take, they're just on the camera when you are moving around before you press the button. So that can help you. Any questions about the phone settings?
We had a question from Dana asking what is Pro in Android and how to use it. So I guess there is a specific setting.
Yeah, it's meant to be somewhere between just letting your phone decide everything about the picture it's taking and giving you some kind of manual controls, but you still can't control as much as you would on a DSLR camera. So you have to know about shutter speed and aperture if you want to start using the Pro mode. But even then, I find the smartphones these days can make really good decisions themselves. So I don't think you get that much benefit in trying to go into the Pro mode, unless you're trying to do something very specific and you know what you're doing. But if you do, then you probably have a professional camera, in which case you'll get a better result from your professional camera. So I personally never use the Pro mode on I've tried and I got frustrated and I stopped using it.
Cool. We have a question from Hazel asking, what's the best way to take photos of small wildlife, squirrels, birds? I can never get zoomed in enough.
Yes, that's a good question. This is where your phone is going to have limitations that you can't do very much about. So the more recent your phone is, the more abilities you would have to zoom in. So I know the Samsung S20 and the latest iPhone 11, they all have very high resolution, which means that once you've taken the photo, you can then digitally crop to a smaller part of that picture and still have a decent resolution of that small thing. but you do need the latest of the latest phones to do that. Otherwise, it's just going to look very grainy, very sharp when you try and zoom in. It's just, at the end of the day, still, unfortunately, just a phone. And if you look at wildlife photographers, the lenses that they have, they weigh tons. They are massive. The glass that you need in order to zoom in this much is something that's very bulky, and therefore it's really hard to get that on a phone.
I think it's then about thinking, how can you take photos, different type of photos of wildlife to illustrate what you're trying to say with, you know, thinking of still or more still elements of wildlife, if there are any.
Yeah, tricky one. I don't know, actually. You could, I mean, it could be about the nature. It could be more about the scene. But then if you really want to focus on wildlife, then I don't know, try and think of animals that let you come close to them, maybe, so that you've got a bit more chance. Animals now are quite slow. But other than that, I can't really give you much advice, I'm afraid. I don't know.
One more question. Sangeeta is asking, what setting should your mattering mode be on?
On your phone? I'm guessing on your phone. Good question. I don't really think I ever changed mine. So the metering mode, just to explain to everyone else, is a parameter that you can change, and that changes how your phone makes the decision how much light to let in across your whole picture. So when I told you earlier, if you don't change your exposure manually with the slider, then you're letting your phone decide how bright or how dark your image should be. And the phone can decide on that based on different things. It can decide on the overall picture. It can decide on a particular point in the picture. And that's, if you change your metering mode, you change how the phone makes this decision. If I even knew how to change on my phone, because I don't, I would put it on average. So I would let the phone meter for the overall picture, because that's going to work in probably 80% of the shots that you want to take. The only times it won't work very well, and you should override it manually with the slider that I talked about, is if you have a very white background, because your phone's going to try and make it look gray. Or if you have a very dark room, a very dark background, then your phone is going to try and brighten it to gray as well. So if you're trying to do something very bright, or in a very bright environment, or in a very dark environment, you'll have to do it manually. But for everything else, if you set it to average metering, then your phone should take a decent picture. For most people who didn't ask the question, don't even worry about this. It's not essential.
And one more quite specific question. What does the HDR setting do on Android phone?
Yeah, so I recommend turning that off personally. What it does is, so in any scene, you've got some really dark elements, well, you've got some dark elements, you've got some light elements, and you've got some elements in between, in the gray zone. What HDR does is it tries, it's all digital, it's all done digitally, so it's not based on your lens or anything, is it tries to make sure the darks are not too dark, the brights are not too bright, and everything is kind of in the middle. So the only reason why you would want to use that, actually, I can't even think of a reason. What it looks like as a result is just it artificially changes the contrast of your pictures and brightens up some parts, and that also makes the colors look a bit more saturated as a result. To me, I think it looks quite fake. So I prefer to turn it off and then change my exposure manually, so that, you know, my darks are not too darks and my whites are whites, and that's it.
Yeah, very good questions. Thank you.
Good. Okay, so moving on. Right, get yourself in the shot. So that's our third part out of 4. So I think I might scan through this a tiny bit quicker. Now I know that for most people, it's probably worse to have your picture taken than to go to the dentist. Like some people tell me that, and I know it's uncomfortable. I know it's vulnerable. I know no one particularly enjoys it, but if you are trying to promote your business, there's no better way to build a relationship with the people who follow you on social media than to let them see who you are, who they're following, who they're talking to, and to show the human part of your business. So it is a really helpful thing to do, to have photos of yourself that you can share on social media. I'm not saying you should take selfies every 5 minutes and just post this. No, but all I'm saying is being as visible as you can and showing the person behind the business is a really good thing to do. So if you see all these people, and if you thought that you were following all of them on Instagram, but all you ever saw on Instagram was their logos and some stock images of, maybe some images of their products, maybe some stock images of some scenes, and you didn't have any idea of who was behind that business, I don't think you'd engage with them in the same way. And I don't think, most importantly, you would necessarily trust them as much, or you would want to work with them as much as if you could get pictures that would tell you a little bit more about who they are, what they care about, what their personality is like, what it's like to work with them. So how can you, so if you agree how important it is, how can you technically try and take some pictures? We're going to look at that, but then we're also going to look at what are the tips that can help you feel a little bit more comfortable, even if you're just taking the photos yourself. So I'm going to start with the technical side of things. How can you take pictures of yourself when you have no one else to take those pictures for you and not have all of them look like a selfie? Because people get a little bit bored. Selfies can be repetitive. It's fine every so often, but if it looks like a real portrait, it will have more impact. So even if you don't have any equipment, you can, or any specific equipment, you can still do this yourself. So all you would do, and I'll show you a quick video in a second, is you need to put your phone that's going to take your picture roughly at the same level of wherever your eyes are going to be in the picture. So here I'm sat on this chair. All I did is I took a stool and I put my phone on top of the stool, and to let it hold vertically, because obviously the phone, if I tried, would just fall. All I did at the time was I took 2 relatively heavy objects. I took 2 candles like this, and I placed the phone on top of my stool between the 2 candles so they could stay straight and the camera could be pointing at me. And what I did is I put myself on a camera on a timer so that I wouldn't have to be touching the button. So that's the problem with selfies, is you have to be touching the button. So therefore your phone has to be quite close to you. Therefore it's only going to be you and the frame. So if you want something that looks a little bit more like what we've got on the screen here, just put your camera somewhere, hold it straight, somewhere at your eye level. Hold it vertical. If you tilt it, if it's looking down, if it's looking up, or if you're doing it with a laptop and your screen is tilted down or tilted up, there will be a lot of distortion on your picture. If you keep it flat, then your proportions in the picture will look as close to reality as possible. Just put 2 heavy objects on the side of it so they can hold straight. And on this side, I've put recommendations for 2 apps which I'm going to introduce. It's on an iPhone, Photo Timer Plus, it's a free app. On an Android phone, Open Camera, it's a free app as well. What these apps do that your phone camera doesn't do is they allow you to set multiple timers at a specific interval. So what that means is you don't have to get up on your phone and start another timer to have another picture. So you can, let's say, set 5 timers at 3 seconds apart, and you can set up a beep or a countdown so that once you've put your phone wherever you've propped it and you've gone to your position, you can try a pose and you can just experiment, because you won't really know what pose you should be taking or not. But try and do something, and then you hear your phone count down 3, 2, 1, next picture, and then you hear it count down, then you move again, next picture. And that really helps you be a bit more natural. Not only it means you can do it yourself, you don't need someone else if you don't have someone else, but it also means you can experiment and do things, write some notes or whatever you're trying to say in your story. And whatever you don't like, it's just a phone, so you just delete the files and then you do it again. So it's actually relatively easy. So let me show you. I've got an example here, if it works. It might not. I was going to show you how I took the picture that you just saw, but it's not going to work. So it's okay. I've already explained it. So look at one of these 2 apps, depending on what phone you've got, and just set how many timers you want, what time apart, and make sure you enable the countdowns just so that you can hear when your phone is going to take a picture.
Dana is asking, what is the distance between you and the phone approximately?
Right. So on this particular shot, it was probably about 4 meters, but there's no hard rule about what it should be. What matters is, what do you want in your frame? So what do you want as your backdrop? How much of it do you want? How much space do you want around yourself? So basically, just what I did is I knew where the chair was that I was going to sit on, and I was just initially standing with my phone, and I walked until what I could see in my camera was what I wanted to see when I was on the picture. And then that was whatever distance that was. I then put a chair, put my phone between the candles, set the timer, and then I didn't have to do anything else. So just imagine the picture you want first. With your phone, just walk to that place that gives you what you want, and then leave your phone there.
I've somewhere seen someone recommending to use the front-facing camera to kind of place it so you can see yourself in the video, in the picture.
Yeah.
And obviously, then you can position yourself while you're just recording a video or something, just seeing yourself, and then you roughly know where the phone is, but also you can play around with the postures and stuff.
Yeah. So like I said earlier, your front camera is going to give you lower quality pictures than your back camera. So if you want to see what picture you're taking, if you want to see yourself, then yes, do it with the front camera, because at least you can see yourself, but be mindful that your pictures are not going to be as good quality as if you use the back camera. So if you don't mind about seeing what pictures you're taking and you're just happy to see them at the end and then do it again, then turn your phone the other way around so that the back of the phone is facing you. You can't see the screen, but at least you're getting better quality pictures. So it's a compromise, and you just have to pick.
I think their advice was to use the front camera to just see yourself and test it, and just figure out your positioning and figure out your background and everything and the framing. And then, yes, set it up and actually take the final pictures from the back camera.
From the back, yeah, you can do that too, exactly, yeah. Cool. Okay, so talked about how you set your phone. What people often tell me is, I just don't know how to pose. I don't know what to do. So, and I always look terrible in pictures. So just a few tips, which I'm going to demonstrate here. I'm going to stay very basic because I could talk about this all day, but a few principles to understand about what cameras do that can sometimes be really unflattering. The first thing to understand is everything that's closer to the camera is going to look bigger. So if I put my hand here, you see the size of my hand compared to the size of my face. In reality, my hand is smaller than my face, but on this picture, my hand is bigger, right? So that applies to everything in your body. So if you, actually you might not see me unless I go a bit further. if you're like this and you put your one side of your body and you put your weight on that side of your body that's closer to the camera, then this on your picture is going to look bigger than in reality. And most women don't particularly want this to look bigger. So all you do is you move your weight to the side of your body that's further away from the camera, and that changes your shape on the picture completely. Equally, if you are facing the camera, flat to the camera, you look at your width and you just do like this, you can see on the picture or on the camera where you see, look at how wide this is. And then if I just turn one part of my body further away from the camera, if you look at my width now, it's less than when I do this. So let's say you've just worked out and you really want to show like the big shoulders that you've been working on, do face the camera straight. Let's say you don't want to look bigger than you are in reality and you want to help yourself with a slightly more flattering angle, then turn at 45 degrees to the camera and you won't look as big. So there's just a few things that can help not get distortion from the camera, because it can be very cruel otherwise. Double chin, something again, just because of how we hold the cameras, that happens a lot and that's not particularly nice. So what can you do to avoid this? You're just going to push your chin to the camera. So let's say this is my normal position and you can see my chin. I'm going to push my chin forward to the camera, and often that's going to make my chin look quite high. So all I do is then bring it down. Look at the difference between if I'm here or if I'm here. So that helps draw your jawline, that helps elongate your neck. It just, again, is just to get you a little bit more comfortable and to avoid the big pitfalls of being on camera. So those are just a few easy things. The other thing that people often say is, well, okay, so, you know, I'm in a slightly more flattering position, or at least I don't get all this distortion, but what do I do? What do I do with my hands in particular? So, you know, they always look robotic or not natural. Use some props, because that gives you something to do. So you can see on the pictures here, you could be typing on a laptop, typing on a phone, holding something, touching your hair, holding your face, just give your hands something to do, and then you'll feel a lot less conscious and your picture will look natural because you are actually doing something. And also, when you look at the camera, often you just freeze and you don't really know how to do it and it just looks tense, but you don't always have to look at the camera. You could just be, you know, holding something, looking over there, or thinking about something, looking to the side, looking down, looking up. So when you set your timer on multiple timer, just use that as an opportunity to just change what you're doing and then see what you like. And more often than not, the results look a lot more natural when you do that. Give it a try and then tell me if that's helped. Any questions about posing or taking your own pictures before I move on to the last bit?
Can't see any questions just yet.
Okay, so I'm going to flip back to my phone. Now we're going to talk about editing. So if you've done all of the things we've talked about, you've been careful about your light, you've made sure it's soft, you make sure you're near a window, you've made sure your background makes sense, and you make sure you've composed your shot quite well, then there's not a lot that you need to do with editing. And I personally don't recommend using filters, whether they're on Instagram or an editing software or presets. I just find they can look tacky quite quickly. So often people use them to correct things that they didn't really know how to do. But if you use the right light and the right setting and you've changed your exposure, very often you don't need to do much more to it. So there's still a use for editing apps. And I'll show you what in particular they are helpful for. Okay, so I'm gonna go. So there are quite a few different editing apps that you can use. The one I recommend, just because I find it easy to use, is called Snapseed. So you can see on my screen there, bottom right-ish. So this is it. So when you open it, it just prompts you to open a photo that you want to edit. So I'm gonna take the photo we just created earlier. So you should recognize this from a second ago. And on the first screen, at the bottom here, what I'm sliding are filters. So, you know, you could decide to use them, but I always find them very artificial. I'm not a particular fan. So I just go back to current, which means you haven't done anything to it. Sorry, no, I'm just gonna cancel this. And then at the bottom of the three options there in the middle, you've got tools. That's where I go. And usually all I need to do, or what I think all you should really do, is crop your images to the dimensions that you want. So on the tools here, you have got crop. There we go. So we said we wanted this picture for Instagram. So I could post it as it is at the moment, or I could decide to crop it square and then post it as a square. And I'm going to do that. So here we've got square. And now I can choose, I can just slide my square to decide where I want to crop it. So let's say I just want a little bit of the coffee, but I want the full notepad. And I'm just going to click OK. Then actually, for some reason, it's been rotated. That's not how I intended to take it. So I'll go back to Tools, and I've got a rotate option here. And at the bottom, I just have this little arrow that rotates my frame. So I wanted it like this. So again, I just click the tick to say that I'm happy with this. And if I go back to tools, the first option on the top left, tune image, actually gives you a lot of parameters that you can change. Mostly your brightness and your exposure and the colors. So how warm your picture is or how cold it is, or how saturated the colors are and so on. So all you need to do here, once you're in here, with your finger, if you slide up or down, it brings this menu. So I'm going to go to brightness. And now, again, it's just with your finger, you slide right to increase the brightness. So I didn't do that on my phone. I should have done this on my phone, but I took the picture before I showed you how to do it. So I didn't do it. But I can then fix it in editing because I didn't do it in the first place. But again, that goes back to the fact that if you do it in the first place, you don't need to change it in the editing. That should already be done. But I've corrected it to what I like, what I find aesthetically pleasing, what works consistently with the rest of my images. You might have different tastes. You can change it. You do whatever you want. If you want to change anything else on here, again, you just tap on the little, you can just, slide your finger up or down. Let's say I want to change the warmth. I want to make it a little bit warmer. So I just slide to the right, it makes it warmer. If I did slide to the left, it will make it bluer and yellower if I slide to the right. So let's say I just want a little bit like this, and then that's done. So these three settings, the rotation, the cropping, and then the adjustments of your light and your colors, I would say it's probably 90% of what you need to use. There are, however, a couple of really cool things you can do on Snapseed, and that's why I like this particular app. One is if you want to remove a distraction. Let's say, so I wrote something on the notepad here and I've changed my mind. I would have preferred to have a white page, for example. In the tools menu again, you can see healing is one of the options. So if I click on healing and I zoom in by pinching my two fingers, if I go over the text, I've done it wrongly and you'll see why. I'm going to undo with the little arrow at the bottom. I need to zoom in more, got fat fingers. So if I go just over what I want to remove or heal, then the phone, it's all using artificial intelligence, which is why it's not always perfect, has deleted what I asked it to delete and replaced it with what it thinks makes sense based on the pictures. So there's loads of patterns of dots on the page. I don't know if you can see them. The phone has automatically thought, I'm going to put more dots instead of what we've deleted. So that's pretty clever. It doesn't always work. You can't go too near edges, which is why the error I did in the first place. I went over the edge and that confused it. But if you're inside the surface, it works really well. So I don't know, let's say you didn't realize that there was a piece of something on your table, or there was some dirt, or there was a fly, or whatever that was, and you want to remove it, use the healing function. It's really useful. So I'm going to validate this. And one more option that's very clever on Snapseed is, let's say you want to expand your backdrop. Again, it's artificial intelligence, so there needs to be a few conditions for this to work well. But you go back to tools, and instead of crop, you go to expand. And when you try and slide the side you want to expand, the software is going to try and analyze what's around it and make more of it. So here it's just created more duvet. It's not perfect. You can see on the bottom left, actually it didn't do a very good job, but that's because it's a complex background that I've got here. If you've just got a wall or a table, it will do a very good job at extending it where you want. I might try here a little bit. It doesn't look too bad, but like I said, it's a slightly too complex background for it here. But that can help. Sometimes you've taken your photo too close and actually you need it a little bit more. If it's a simple backdrop, just extend it in your editing and your phone does that for you, which is pretty smart. Okay, so we've talked about the editing. That's the app that I was talking about, Snapseed, and this is what we've just done. One more thing is, once you've taken your photos, I'm guessing in the first place you just wanted to share them on your feed, which, you know, there was a story behind it, a message you wanted to talk about, great. But it doesn't have to stop there. You can then reuse these images that you've worked hard to create for other purposes. So I've just shown a few examples here. You know, I could have posted this as a single picture on my Facebook feed, for example, but then I've just created a collage that I can use with my logo as a Facebook banner, for example. Or I can use this picture that I took as a cover for, or maybe this one, as a cover for my blog. I just added a little bit of graphic here, a little bit of text, and now I can reuse this picture to promote a blog that I'm doing. This one, same thing, is to promote a blog post, but it's in the format of a Pinterest pin. So all I've done is I already had my picture, I just added some text, added my logo, done. So that's the second use for my image. Here, that's a flat lay, which I've used as a story background on Instagram. And again, I've added text to my picture, changed the transparency so that it's not, so that it looks a little bit lighter, and just added text to it. So there's loads of things that you can do to make the most use that you can from the pictures you've taken for your social media. And that's it. That's a bit of a summary. So make sure that you start with a plan for your photos. Don't just try and figure out what photos you should take. Go back to what's the message you're trying to talk about, what are your brand aesthetics and values that your photos need to fit with, and then what's the ideas that you have for your photos. Be methodical about finding the right lights, checking your background, and composing your picture as much as you can, or as often as you can. Try and get in the shots as well and share those pictures because people react really well to them. And then try and do all these things right so that you can keep your editing minimal, and then remember that you can reuse those pictures quite a few times before people even realize that they've seen them before. And that's it. A few details here if you want to get more tips on my Instagram or find out more about working with me on my website, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. It was brilliant. We have a couple of questions. Dana has asked, how much time should we set for a day to take photos? I guess, is there an advice how much time it could take?
once you get into the rhythm, so once you've gone over the fact that you've got to set up your shots and find the right place and everything, you might as well take as many as you can. So I would say, I mean, try and plan your content and try and plan the pictures that you can for quite a few weeks, and then allocate maybe 2-3 hours to just, you know, restyle, reset, do a few more. It doesn't really matter, or it just depends on what works for you, or you can just take them spontaneously when you get a chance. There's no reason, as long as you've got natural light, so don't do it for longer than the sun is out, because otherwise you're going to start using artificial light and that's not going to look the same. But it's up to you, really.
Yeah. Another question is, if you have an older phone that kind of struggles with having too many apps on it, is there an app that would work on a Mac or PC that you would recommend for using editing photos that's not full on Photoshop?
Right. Yes, there are. Now, so there are softwares that you need to pay for, like Photoshop or Lightroom, but you probably don't want to do that if you're not going to use them that often. There's a free web version of Photoshop that you can just use on any browser on a computer. So that's probably what I would recommend, but that's because I've never looked for anything else. There might be others. I can look for it and let you know. I'll check who asked the question.
Claire asked the question.
Okay, yeah, so Claire, I can definitely get back to you on that.
Another question is from Mark, asking, what tools do you use to add text?
Yes, good point. I personally like to use Canva. So all the blog posts and the Pinterest pin that you've seen on there, I've designed these in Canva. So you can use the free version of Canva, and you can use pre-made templates if you want, so that you've already got the right dimensions for what you want to use them for. There's already different fonts and everything that's been done for you, and then you can just change the text, or you can just add, you know, create your own dimensions, put your own pictures and add your own text. So I like Canva for that.
And you can, to certain limits, use Canva on your phone.
Yeah.
But obviously it's much more comfortable to use it on a desktop. I do,
it's easy on a desktop, yeah.
When I really quickly need to add something on my phone, I use Spark Post, which is an Adobe app, which is free to use, and it's quite good for adding text and stuff like that.
True.
So,
yeah, Spark Post is very good.
It's because it's Adobe app, it has a decent abilities, but it has a free version.
Yeah.
Pip is asking, how do you do the transparency so the image is faded in the background, please?
Yeah, so I did that on Canva as well, just because that's what I was using on that particular day. There might be other places to do it. So on Canva, once you've got your design that you're working on and you add your picture to it, then there's a little icon on the top right that when you click on it, it gives you a slider for transparency. So you just slide left, and the more left you go, the more transparent your image becomes and the more muted it becomes, and then you can add your text onto it quite easily. Great. Well, I'm glad you found it helpful. If you want to ask me anything else, just you can contact me on Instagram, or let me know. And then if you try, and if you want to get some feedback on what you've created and you want some more advice, let me know as well. I'll be always happy to answer and to help.
Yeah, absolutely. Get sharing, tag Elodie or tag us at Camp social media. We would love to see, you know, your improvements. We would love to see your photos, and obviously we would love to help you spread the word about your business. So make sure to find us and find Elodie and tag us. I've seen a comment a while ago from Dana who said that she tried to edit a photo and she absolutely loved how it looks right now. So, you know, taking action in the moment is what we thank you so much for joining us. We are pretty much on time. I'm very happy about that. And thank you so for spending the evening with us. And yeah, if you have any questions, get in touch. Other than that, have a lovely rest of the evening and see you soon.